Hey everybody, it's Dr. Kevin McGovern with another Velocity RX podcast. I have my good buddy and colleague back, Dr. Clay Hammons. Today we're going to start to do a series of actual real life case studies and talk about it back and forth. But before that, I got to pay some bills. So please click like and subscribe this podcast. It helps both of us out. It helps my mission to save 1 million arms. And please visit velocityrx.org. Today, my new product of my Velocity RX journal dropped today. That's 2 journal articles a month emailed directly to you with actual usable information, provable information, followed by 2 group coaching calls per month for $39, which, Clay, that's like free, right? For that. I mean, actually, that's ridiculously low, but
Insane value.
insane value. But that's my mission to help everyone, and I don't want cost to be a barrier. So check that out. It's on my website, and Clay, I'm certainly going to have you probably write for that journal once we get up and moving with that. Write some guest
Sure,
articles
I'd
and
love
come
to.
on for some guest coaching. All right. So without further ado, let's get this going. So Clay, you came up with this idea, which I think is great. So why don't you take the ball and let's lead us off?
Yeah, so bring up this case study. So a few weeks ago, I had a call 10U pitcher. Um, he had little league elbow last October, also with an avulsion fracture, which is just a little bone that's kind of peeled off there with it. So he went through treatment, casting, rest. Went to a big box PT clinic, went through a whole PT protocol, which was, consisted of just like wrist and elbow and shoulder exercises, nothing to address any kind of mechanical faults that you may want to see or anything really functional. It's just honed in on the elbow, right? Finishes that
Like most big box,
like
a-
most big box clinics.
and
Hey, let's
just to help people, what a big box is your ATIs, your US physical therapies. Not
finish
knocking them. I used to own one. That have a million patients there at once, and that's literally because insurance companies pay $3.50 for visits, and that you have to see 50
yeah.
people at a time, or you go out of business. And that's what and you just don't get the one-on-one care that Clay and I do at a concierge level, which we are cash-based PT.
That's right. And so, finishes that, gets released to throw again in the spring. Okay, so he goes and throws
Now,
again.
who released him to throw? The doc, the
Yeah, the doc,
therapist.
the doc. Um, but I don't think they kind of try to ramp up a little bit slower, but I don't think there was anything, refined by the therapist on any kind of throwing program or protocol, right?
And who, like, is this like? Do they follow a certain
I
throwing program, or is it
I
just
don't
kind of
think
go back?
I think it was just wing it,
Just wing
go
it.
slow and then go, right?
Yep.
And so does that for 3 weeks, and then March 1st, boom, another avulsion fracture of the elbow and little league elbow. And so goes and seeks care from a different physician, um, who deals with this a little bit more directly, and kind of goes through the same thing, a little bit of bracing and casting. And then he said, "Hey, I want you to see somebody baseball specific," right? Finds me, comes in, and we do the exam. And I think we've talked before on here about there are certain kids, players, maybe of all ages even, that there's certain findings that we find that I would say this this child or this kid or this person is not fit to throw a baseball. Okay. Until we address these underlying impairments. Okay. So I'm going to go through what we found on this exam. There was a 75% limitation in thoracic and lumbar extension.
And now this is on a
10,
ten-year-old boy who,
10-year old.
whose flexibility should be off the chart.
Correct.
Okay.
Scapular dyskinesia. Getting a lot of upper trap involvement whenever he goes to raise the arm during the throwing process. This is on the functional exam. Um, External rotation strength was 4 out of 5 with an infraspinatus trigger point. That was an easy fix. Went right back to 5 out of 5 when we got rid of that trigger point. Ankle dorsiflexion. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Who, who who's gonna look at the ankle and relate that to what's going on with the elbow? You, me,
Yes.
right? Very, very, very few of us.
I can tell you who's not. There's
Yes.
tread, driveline, velo U,
Yeah.
not gonna happen. Armcare.com, not gonna happen.
Passive ankle dorsiflexion was 0 degrees.
On a 10-year-old. Now, no history of any history of lower leg injury at all. Like
No,
any kind of like Osgood
no, and I
Schlatter's
even
disease process, anything like that.
no, and I even asked the dad. I was like, "Hey,
Fevers.
was he like a toe walker as a kid? Some kids like to walk on their
Yep.
toes, it's like a neurological or developmental thing." He said, not that I remember, but my daughter does that, and so I was like, well, maybe he did it too. I don't know, but anyway, we need about 10 to 15 degrees of ankle dorsiflexion passively to be able to load the lower half effectively. And he's got neutral, which is, you think 10 to 15 degrees isn't much, but in the ankle, that's a lot. That is
That's even
substantial.
that would even affect him walking down a stair. You might
Yeah.
see him hip hike or do something to go down
Yes.
a stair or get, yeah, right.
And so that got me thinking. I said, well, if he can't dorsiflex,
Was
what's
this
his
on, sorry,
squat?
was this on both ankles or just one?
Both.
Both.
Yeah,
Okay.
bilateral.
Yep.
So that got me thinking, what's his squat look like? So I said, hey, just do a squat.
I'm gonna guess not good.
Not good. He got to about 30 degrees of knee flexion with his squat, and his heels went whoop
Mm.
because he didn't have the dorsiflexion to even get into a squat.
And what did his lordosis look like?
Um, Bad because he's 75% limitation in extension. So we can't even get there, right? That was
Nope.
one of the first findings. And then also he had excessive what we call genu valgus, or his knees go in due to lack of glute involvement, right? So his knees wanted to point there, like the high beams were crossing. We want him to stay straight.
So guys, just to catch up, so doing a functional movement like a squat, which in baseball is, and any sport is the most important functional movement. I mean, even getting in a set position for the pitch to be thrown, he can't even get into a proper squat, and losing his lumbar lordosis, the inward curve, literally shuts off all of the muscles of his spine, his glutes, his hamstring. He's literally locked out of the car. Like there's like he's on an island by himself, and it's not good. And
Yeah,
this is before he's ever thrown a pitch.
yeah. Well, he's already thrown pitches, right? But we should be picking this up. So this is one kid that I would look at and do this exam and say, you're not fit to throw a baseball yet until we address these things. I'll keep going. So those were kind of the big things. And then I looked at his just like pure pitching mechanics. Um, Very arm dominant, almost no trunk rotation or flexion with follow through. His hips and shoulders open way early, just exposing the arm, kind of getting pushy. Very toe dominant, on the back and front sides. So again, he
So
can't get
he get up on
dorsiflexion,
his toe.
so he
Yeah.
can't get in dorsiflexion. So he just wants to stay up on his toes, on his drive leg, and then when he gets down to his lead leg block, he's on his toe, and then his knee wants to collapse forward. So that's what I found on his pitching mechanics. And so most of these things were corrected within a week or two. So
So
within
guys, when we say all physical therapy is not the same, here's a kid coming off physical therapy, and Clay just outlined a list of things that would be glaring to the naked eye, just probably just watching the kid walk. You can
right,
probably pick up most of that.
yeah. And so those were the big things, and at the elbow, he had little to no tenderness of the medial epicondyle, negative valgus stress testing. So the elbow was pretty much healed at this point. So why am I gonna go in and just, yes, I mean this stuff is good to do the strengthening. Okay. I mean that's fine. You're gonna get that. But those other things are the glaring functional
Root causes.
functions that are the result of his elbow hurting. So
So
the
what do you think
elbow,
the biggest root cause of his problem was if you had to pick? Or let's say if you had to
I,
pick the top three, what would you say?
I would say zero ankle dorsiflexion is number one,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't allowing him to squat, right? I would say the 75% limitation in thoracolumbar extension would probably be number two, and then scapular dyskinesia.
Right. All right. So then so how now, what did you do for a treatment plan? How did you start? What did you do?
Yeah. So
First of all, I'm assuming you showed mom or dad this, right? I mean, you
oh
pointed
yeah,
at
yeah,
it.
they were there, and the parents are great. Dad's great. He's actually a former baseball player, pitcher,
Okay.
college even,
So he must have been like, my goodness, right? It's
but was
once you
just
see
like
it, you can't look
eye
away then.
opening. And then he told me yesterday. I saw him yesterday, and he was like, I wish that I would have had somebody like you when I was younger, because even though I pitched at a higher level, like I never knew these mechanical things.
Well,
You
and
know.
guess what? It's still not being taught at higher levels now. Like,
And so
so
yeah, what do we do? I mean, we just addressed the dysfunction. So I had him do prone press ups, gave him a little bit of overpressure, some manipulation of the spine to try to get his extension back. We did ankle dorsiflexion stretches, right? We want to stretch that heel cord, we want to stretch the gastroc and the soleus, to get
how
him
was
that.
the mobility of his foot? Did you have to do any manipulations there? Subtalar
Foot was
joint?
fine. Great toe
Yeah.
was fine. I did do some mobs there to increase dorsiflexion
Okay,
at the
good.
um, at the talocrural joint or the ankle joint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we did showed him some self ankle mobilizations he could do at home. Um, uh, Showed him a proper squat form that I wanted him to work on. And we did it with a ball behind his back, so it'd be easier for him at first, a little bit more supported, so that
Yep.
he could kind of get that feel like he was sitting down in a chair, able to maintain his lordosis, getting into ankle dorsiflexion, keeping his knees apart, so he's getting glute activation, which is really important while we're on the mount on our drive leg. So showed him those type of things, right? So which is not even none of that's at the elbow, by the way.
I haven't, nothing.
So he's got an elbow problem, but all of his exercises are spine, ankle, hip.
So parents, if you're hearing this and your kid has an elbow problem and your therapist is working on the elbow, they're probably working on the wrong thing.
Run.
Yeah, run. I mean, literally, if they're doing what I call, traffic, traffic exercises, run, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now what did you do for the scapula? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the scapula, then we went on once those glaring things were addressed, which really, I mean, he's 10 years old. Those things really improved a lot
Quickly.
faster,
Yeah.
a lot faster than I even thought. Like within 1 to 2 weeks, we had full ankle dorsiflexion, full thoracolumbar extension, and then so we went into the scap and we said, look, we've got to get out of this upper trap involvement, okay? And so yeah,
Big time shrugger,
big time shrugger, like to just shrug when we raise, right? As we see, a lot of guys do, even at the pro level.
pro level. Yep.
Yeah, so we just started hammering, low trap exercises, things to start getting the scapular down and back, right? Training that with external rotation, training that with as we raise our arms. So a lot of exercises to promote that kind of down and in motion of the scapula. It's just going to set the glenohumeral joint up and prevent shoulder impingement.
So now one of the things that I do in this, um, I like to use the half foam roller,
Mhm.
right? And I have them lie on it longitudinally.
Yeah,
One, because I
I like that.
think that it aligns the spine using our friend Sir Isaac Newton and gravity, and then gives some tactile feedback. And I'll literally just have them do, isometric contractions down and in to that roller. And then I'll add a couple things, right? Because no muscles move independently. So as they advance, I'll have them do glute sets, right? And when you're in hook lying, doing a glute set isn't easy, right? So they'll do the scapular depression and the glute sets, and maybe like a pelvic tilt or a transverse abdominis contraction. So now we have everything contracting.
Got it all firing together.
Yeah. And then one of the things I do, which I don't think people do enough, is the serratus muscle.
Mm,
So guys, the serratus muscle, I like to call the Cirque du Soleil muscle. And the reason why is because it's pretty much pound for pound, besides the tongue, which is, I think, the strongest muscle in the body. The serratus is incredibly strong. Now, why do I call it the Cirque du Soleil muscle? Because that's the muscle, if you lie on your back and do a push up or do a bench press and push more, that's your serratus muscle, which, you could actually hold someone up who's like, holding them up by their hands or their feet, like those gymnasts do. So I will literally do that from that same position. I'll have them lie and I'll have them keeping their arms completely flaccid, reach to their heels and then tuck. And I found that to be an enormous success and hold all those contractions together.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. The serratus is great to train both open chain and closed.
Correct.
So
Correct. Yeah.
your hands are on the ground, serratus presses, bear
Yeah.
crawls, all of
And
that.
so people know serratus on the bodybuilders, it wraps around. You'll see those three fingers. You won't see it on me. Maybe Clay's got that, but I certainly don't.
Not
But
anymore.
it really anchors. It really plays a huge role in anchoring the shoulder blade to the thoracic spine and keeping
Yes,
it stable. It's a muscle
stable.
that's really not trained very well.
Mhm.
Um,
I
all
agree.
right, what was next?
Yeah, so we've just kind of been hammering that home, and then once all those impairments were fixed, then we went into pitching mechanics and breaking that down and applying what we've learned with the body over into the function that you want to do and perform, which is pitching or
Right. And so
throwing a baseball.
just to rewind, before they saw you, this kid, he
Mm,
was released to throw.
right.
He was released to throw, which would have been disastrous for that poor kid.
And so yeah, so then we went and, we're about 4 weeks along now. We've still not thrown a baseball.
That's great. Are you working
And
on any, so how, like now, what's your next? All right, so we'll go back up for a sec.
Mhm.
So, um, I do a lot of lat work too, and I don't mean like doing pull-ups. I think the lat is kind of like the kid, the buddy you forgot about, like the car pulls up and everyone jumps in and takes off, and the lat's like, "Hey, what happened?" And the reason why I say that is because, as you know, it has function as a lumbar extensor, right? So it's going to help keep the lordosis of the back, and also it's a scapular kind of depressor. So I think it gets confused now when we have issues at both ends, right? We've got shoulder blades that are out of whack, and we've got a lordosis that's not. So I like to kind of make sure that we're re-educating the lat, and I do that by kind of, even when we're doing a squat, right? I'll have them, hold that down in scapular depression, just trying to do muscle work at both ends of the kinetic chain just to kind of increase muscle memory. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, lats are great, and I think they play a very important role in both acceleration and deceleration of the arm.
Absolutely.
And so I train a lot of the decelerators, the stuff that's going on back here, um, because we can't speed up, but we can't slow down.
I love that line.
And so
Bravo.
we've got to be able to hit the brakes and hit them hard
Mm-hmm.
before we can really start working on things that accelerate. And so training a lot of that stuff with them, and then like I said, just kind of ruthless mastery of just pitching mechanics right now. So we're taking all the stuff that we learned to address the impairments, and then just apply them to pitching mechanics, right? Breaking it down step by step, right? Step one, you know, I know that's another thing. He had zero balance and control. And so step one, we've got to have balance on our drive leg, right, to be able to stay there, right? We've got to be able to move down the mound athletically, right, and stay closed doing it, right, creating potential energy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got to be able to rotate hip, right, creating hip shoulder separation, rotate thoracic spine, and then follow through, which he had zero before, right? So broke all that down. I really like the towel drill at the end to kind of bring everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And then so we can really learn a lot from that. So the towel gives feedback, right? If we're accelerating the arm too early, the towel's going to fly open. I want it to pop down through whatever it is that you're going to hit. For me, it's a jump box in here, right?
Same here, or a folding chair, which makes a
Yeah.
really good popping sound.
And so he's done really, really well. He's progressed amazingly. The only thing now that we're still kind of working on is he still wants to be toe dominant on
Okay.
on both sides. And so with that, we're not getting a good lead leg block because we're landing on our toe, and then our knee just wants
Mm-hmm.
to kind of keep folding forward. So we're not able to transfer that energy back up. So that's kind of our main focus right now. And even on his drive leg, he just doesn't want to stay through his heel, right? Because he's been so toe dominant for so long that we have to
Mm.
have that in the brain of like, hey, now you have the range of motion, okay, but we've got to use it. And so now we're just kind of training him to get his glutes a little bit more involved and get on that heel, block the leg a little bit more to transfer the energy back up into the arm.
You may want to try, I guess I call them reverse lunges. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably not the right, but getting him
It's a lot.
in a knee, on a 90-90 position where he's taking a knee,
Right.
right? And then have him lift off the ground 1 millimeter. Like, I have the catcher squats where you're lifting off. I
Right.
do the same version with the lunge and really focusing on his foot, on the front foot to keep that as he lifts off, and then I go to the other end and have him drop only a quarter. Right, I never do the whole
Mm-hmm.
motion. I have him control like from ground up to an eighth and then down because that's really simulates kind of where pitching would be, and that sometimes that helps with that foot.
Okay. Well, next time we'll definitely try that. And then yeah, so next week we're going to we're gonna go get another facility and start our throwing
Start
program.
throwing.
We're gonna start our
For
return to throwing program.
5 weeks after, 6 weeks
5.
after he was released to throw without your intervention. My goodness. But getting back to balance, I mean, everyone laughs at my crane test, where it's essentially a one-legged marching the Karate Kid crane. Being one-legged is such a measure of athleticism. I can't even preach as to how much. We are never two-legged, right? Like take a high-speed camera and look at any athlete. How many times is that athlete two-legged, meaning equal weight on both feet during any type of athlete? Never. I mean,
Yeah.
they're never. You're always one-legged, and you have to be able to not only balance, but accelerate, more importantly, decelerate, and then balance on one leg. And so many kids come in here, I can, bench, or I could deadlift, 300 pounds. I could squat 250 pounds. Yeah, can you just stand on one leg for 5 seconds with your eyes closed?
Nope.
Zero. No
Nope.
chance. So all of that power, right? Because they're still building power, whether it's good or bad, it's in a tank, is then being applied or forced. Think of a nuclear reactor, right? We got all this power, right? We're in Chernobyl, and we send it down the pipe, and the pipe isn't connected. It's all over the place. Are you going to turn that reactor on? No. But that's what that I see balance is such, or one-legged, I don't even know what you want to call it. Athleticism, one-legged coordination is lacking and it's not just baseball players. It's not
Yeah.
just players.
Oh, and then you're gonna love this because I had to ask him this question,
Here
right?
we go.
So I had to ask him this question because, I would say 90+% of kids especially answer this the wrong way. You got to train, I asked him this on the first day. You got a train, right? You got an engine and you got a caboose. Which one of those do you think your arm is when you throw a baseball?
And
What do you think his answer was, Kevin?
he didn't say caboose.
He didn't say caboose, he said engine, right? And so that's a big thing for me, and that's a glaring thing on the first day when I'm treating one of these kids is, I ask that question. And for me, it's to see where their mindset is around throwing a baseball.
Yep.
So his mindset was I throw a baseball with my arm. And that's what he did. And so it's just taking that and getting him and getting the parents to realize that no, we don't. We use our
No.
body. Okay. The arm is the last thing to fire when we're going downhill during that sequence.
Yep.
Okay. So for him, that was eye opening. He's like, really? I was like, yes, right. And I'm here, let me show you, right? So we go through this, then I want it to fire, right? Which is why I think the towel drill is great. I know some people may not like it. I don't really know
Well,
why,
that's because the people
but
who don't like it are not using it the way you and I are
using it
using it.
correctly, yeah.
And
Like
yes,
one of the things was he was like, no, you stay too linear. I'm like, no, I want rotation through
yeah,
it, right?
right.
I don't I
They
don't
don't
want
know
to
what
stay
they're
like
talking about.
this.
Right.
I want to rotate through it, right? But that will really put that in their mind that, oh well, I can't slap that towel unless my arm's the caboose,
Right.
right?
So that's by far the most eye-opening thing that I've ever heard you say, and it's so true. But I like to look at things like in common sense. There was a great golfer years ago named Hal Sutton who said the only way to be a good golfer is to hit the golf ball with your big muscles, because if you use your big muscles, you'll never choke. And what he meant by that is that if you get army, right, there's not enough. I mean, just here's my arm and here's the rest of me, right? So in the connected to my trunk are significantly larger muscles that have significantly bigger nerves that have significantly more blood supply. Everything is bigger, right? And if you're using the small muscles to do an activity, you're not going to build muscle memory. The big muscles are going to build muscle memory much better because they're um, bigger, right? So, but this whole cult of velocity has gotten away from using the big muscles that, Roger Clemens used and Kurt Schilling used and all the guy and, Bob Gibson used and gotten away to slinging the ball. Literally, these pitchers are slinging it, drifting
Mhm.
their whole body weight forward. And the only thing that's back there is they're building this tension and they're teaching it and they know it's wrong, but they still continue to teach it to sling this arm. And then, you know, 75% of the people increase their velocity, the other 25% have never heard of again. They think it's a success rate. I don't actually, but that's just the way it is. And if you listen to my last podcast I had with Chris O'Leary, uh, you should go back and listen to it. He'll tell you right there, the people that are all into this velocity cultists know it's wrong, and still teach it.
Well, and then I think, when you're really arm dominant like that, you just open yourself up for a larger margin of error
Yeah.
during the throw. And
Yep.
so you're not commanding the strike zone as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, look at now. I mean, the world's just look at the World Series. Guys are out of the game in 4 innings, right?
Yeah.
And then, this past World Series, unfortunately, Fernando Valenzuela had passed away, and they were doing a segment on it, and there he was in 1981, I believe, throwing 11 innings or 10 or 11 innings in the World Series. That's
Yeah.
6 pitchers today.
Yeah. And so isn't it crazy? Like today we have pitchers, major league pitchers that are throwing significantly less pitches in games
Significantly less.
and getting hurt at a
Astounding rate.
significantly higher rate.
Yep.
And so what do you attribute that to? I know what I attribute it to, but what do you attribute it to?
It's this whole cult. So one, coaches in high school or college are lazy, right? Like they're not going to look like Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux, arguably the greatest pitcher of our generation, doesn't get a Division I shot in today's game.
Yeah.
No one's looking at him because his number wouldn't be 92, right? So these coaches are lazy. They're not looking. It's just this, whatever they hit on the radar. These other camps and clinics or showcases are pounding this button, and velo doesn't matter. Or velo matters way too much, not getting outs. I like to look at whip. I mean, that's the stat that I look at. What's your walks and hits, right?
That's
You
the
know,
best. Yeah, it's the best one
and
to
to
measure.
me, and which is so funny, like if you can't hit a fastball, right? So it's so like you gotta throw 100, and then on the other side, oh yeah, he can't hit 95. He can't play. He's not in the game. So you're training the pitcher to do something that if the player can't hit it, he's not in the game, right? No one's saying, I don't hear anyone saying he's having trouble with off speed pitches because no one can throw them for strikes in today's game.
I mean, I think it's just completely, the reason why that you're seeing pitchers throw less pitches and getting hurt more is also the way that they train and what they're being taught.
Oh, absolutely.
Max long toss, weighted balls, reverse pivot throws, all that kind of stuff, right? That's all newer stuff that really wasn't done in, say, the Nolan Ryan era or even
No,
the Greg Maddux era, right? So, like, why? I think that maybe starting now and into the near future, you're going to see a shift back to the
I
old
hope
way. I think, I hope.
I hope so. Until you
Um,
run out of, I mean, I think what's going to happen is it may come down to like money. And what I mean by that is like how are these companies insuring these contracts, right? Once that stops, right? Once these companies realize, well, what do you mean his injury was caused? Well, yeah, dude, I could have told you Garrett Cole was going to blow out last year because he injured his elbow and he didn't change anything. Of course, he's going to have Tommy John surgery the next year.
yeah, and he
Spencer
ramped up,
Strider
and he
Spencer Strider didn't change anything either. Otani didn't change anything. Why are you insuring these contracts? Why are you letting the team off? Because I'm assuming, I don't know that, but I'm assuming that once the insurance picks up, they don't have to, the Major League Ball Club doesn't have to pay that money.
right,
So they can sign, yeah, oh yeah, we're going to sign you for $80 million a year. We know you're going to get hurt, and insurance is going to pick up, half of that contract. And then of course, our rates are going to get up, so we're going to put everything back on the fan. So yeah, when you sit in the last row of the upper deck at Yankee Stadium, yeah, it is $96. And that's really what it comes down to,
yeah,
economics. But right now it's not hurting it's not hurting anyone in the wallet.
hmm,
And the transfer portal in college is making, another blindfold because guys are just moving all over the place. So you're not seeing um the injury. I mean, I had a kid a couple years ago, a year after they won the national title at Coastal Carolina. He was here, a kid from Pennsylvania. He came up to my office, and his mother said the most prolific thing I'd ever heard. He had like 5 or 6 guys on that team were down, out, hurt, elbow, shoulder, Tommy John. And I'm like, oh my God, what are they doing there? And she said, well, how do you know they didn't come there already injured? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. That's began me to think that, you know, these 18-year-old arms are really 36-year-old arms by the time they get to college and are really 45-year-old arms by the time they get to major leagues, comparatively to, when you and I were little kids.
yeah, makes sense.
And these guys are just getting, and of course, again, they're throwing for their high school team on a Tuesday in 35-degree weather up here, and then flying on the weekend to a perfect game showcase or any kind of that's just the one nothing against them. I just don't know anyone else, but I'm sure there are others throwing as hard as they can on the weekend, then coming back again and pitching on Monday.
Yeah, and doing zero arm care, active recovery in the meantime.
And those doing arm care and things like would make you and I cringe because the right people aren't in areas of where they have a say in what's happening. Because I'm sure if you and I looked at any college or major league program 75% of the things they're doing we'd cringe at. And I've talked to Kevin Barr, who was the trainer of the Florida Marlins, been on the podcast, and he's like, dude, you would literally, you said you could never work there. They'd fire you in one day. He's like, because you'd go in and
True.
be like, what the bleep are you people doing? And I've seen
What
it,
is
when I was
burning this down?
yeah, I mean, I was a trainer of an independent team back in 2006 in Nashville Pride, where Butch Hobson was this is where this became alarming to me. He was the manager, great bunch of guys, but for those who don't know, like independent are all the retreads, right? All the guys, like I had Dan Reichert on the team. He had pitched in the Royals organization for like 5 or 6 years. I had Jeff Getz, who was a #1 draft pick the same year that Reichert came out. So just looking at him, he lives in Tampa, right? He gets traded from the Marlins to the Mets in the Mike Piazza deal, right? He gets traded, right? And he's a lefty. And I looked at like his picture in high school of him throwing, and dude, talk about layback. His arm was like in another county. And I was like, "Oh my God, how did you throw like that?" And uh he had one more AAA start and they're going to call him up, right? Because he was like 97 as a lefty. And he went out, he threw something, didn't feel right. Make a long story short, had a labral tear. Andrews did the surgery, and he showed me his rehab book. And shoulder shrugs and lateral raises were two of the exercises that a major league, at that time he got a signing bonus of like $1.9 million, which is chicken feed today, but we're talking 1997. Lateral raises and shrugs, two things you and I would never in a million years do to any pit ever. Those are
We're gonna do
part
the
of this
opposite.
program. He never came back from surgery. He got released. I think he told me he went to the Yankees. Yankees were paying him $50,000 a month just to try to get him to see if he can come back, but he just had this like constant pain in his shoulder. I mean, I'm pretty baseball proficient. He and I would play catch, dude. He'd throw me his curveball. I knew it was coming. It hit me in the shin every single time. I could not catch it. That's the amount of movement he had. Never pitched again.
Wow.
Independent, but even then he just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But can you imagine? I mean, that's the Yankees, the Marlins. That's I'm looking at his book.
Yeah, and then like you said, we would do the exact opposite in terms of the scapula.
Yeah,
Those are
exact
the two
opposite.
things that are going to work here. We're going to be
And that's
doing.
what parents, I'm like, no, dude, you can't shrug. If you
Mm,
can't, like, I don't know how many times I hammer home the scapulohumeral rhythm. Like, it's a law for a reason. I didn't invent it. I got a whole bookshelf of books right behind me that talk about it, right? And you can't, if you break it, you're gonna break.
yeah,
And it's just, it's the brainwashing. And those parents of this child should be grateful. And whatever you charge them, it's not enough.
yeah. No, it's really not. But
It's
yes,
not
they
enough,
they
right?
are
And I'm
very
just saying, I'm not
grateful.
trying to be like, but I'm just like what is the actual value? Like I said to a parent, like, well, what's your ultimate goal? I said, well, my ultimate goal, I'm not sure yours is that your son chooses when he stops playing. It's not chosen for him.
Yeah,
What do you mean? I'm like, well, he chooses. Like I stopped pitching at 47 because, I was old. Like I want, I don't want him to stop pitching at 21 because it's his third surgery.
right.
No, that's the mission to save a million arms.
And that's my whole goal is really focusing on the youth game because I I I just want to help these kids be the best that they can be
Yeah,
without hurting their arm. Because
right.
what's going to happen to this 10-year-old if he didn't find somebody like me? Okay. He's going to go throw. His arm's going to continue to hurt. He's going to get a little bit older. The growth plate's going to close. He's going to get 16, and then he's going to have Tommy John because
And
the
he's gonna
ligament, not
hate
the growth plate.
baseball. Yep, he's
Yeah.
gonna hate baseball and he's gonna play lacrosse. And then they wonder why, well, the numbers of participants of baseball are down. Well, yeah, of course they're down because the kids are getting alarmingly injured, and not just pitchers, because here's the other thing that people aren't handling. People aren't handling puberty. I'm constantly hammering home about that. Like, yeah, on the we watched in August, we watched little Johnny at 5'4" in the Little League World Series, and then he comes back to school in the fall and he's 6'4", right? And no one handles that. And everything that you just went over are things you would look at: the foot, the spine, all that stuff that no one's looking at. And
Right. No,
even
here's the
even
elbow.
physical therapists aren't looking at it.
Right, because they're getting the referral from the physician and it says Little League elbow
Yeah.
and who,
Well,
and
and it's not,
elbow exercises, and they're doing what they do, but they only know what they know and they don't know what they don't know.
they
So go
only
see
don't know.
somebody
And
that
some of
knows.
it, some of it's insurance problems that, like, some of it's laziness. Like, well, why are you doing squat for an elbow? You got to document all that out because some reviewer's looking at your thing before it goes out to get maximum reimbursement. So it's a whole
Whole
cycle
nother,
of stuff,
that's a
and
whole
I'm
nother
so
podcast.
happy I'm not in that. I'm so happy I'm not in that game anymore.
Same, same. But yeah, man. So I'm excited for him, and I've got three Little League elbows right now. Two were
Wow.
10, two were 10, and one's 11. And I'm just thankful that I get to work with them and kind of refine their craft a little bit so that they can go play the game that they love and be a kid and enjoy the game rather than sitting out from the game.
Wow. All right. I like it. Well, thank you again, my friend, for coming on. We have to do
For
more of
having me.
these.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
we have to get more of the message out there that there is a solution. Um, Arm injuries are not a rite of passage. It's not, I mean, it's just the stuff I've heard is you can't throw hard with a safe arm. Okay. It's not like, it's bound to happen. No, it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have, especially at the youth level, where it's
Not a
so
rite of
important.
passage.
Yeah, it's so important to move correctly. And what we do is going to improve your son or daughter to be a better athlete across the board. They ask about my arm care exercise. I'm like, well, my arm care exercises are dentistry exercises. And what I mean by that, just like the dentist, you brush your teeth twice a day. You're going to do these exercises forever to keep you healthy.
Mm.
And that's basically what it is. So Clay, how can people get in touch with you? I love the new logo, your new office. Look at the digs
Oh, thanks,
behind you.
man. Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Performance Solutions Rehab. Yeah, DM me if even if you have any questions, like, hey, Clay, what do you think about this? Like, I'll get back
Yep.
to
And then
you the same
obviously,
day.
yep, ask questions on the podcast. I know I respond to as many as I can. Send an email. But yeah, any questions, I don't want to, I'm not going to, we're not going to field questions about attackers and bots. I just ignore those, who you,
If you
you
have
don't
true,
throw 95, you're never going to get drafted. Like, I'm not going to field those questions. So
yeah, if you have any questions, and even if you're like, hey, well, what do you think of my kid's mechanics? Okay, well, just send me a video and let's go through
yeah,
them. May
yeah, we'll
charge
go
you a
through.
little fee for that, but it's
Right,
what you need to be working on, and we can do that
right,
online. Easy.
right. Yeah. Those showcases are never, ever, ever going to fix your mechanics. That I can tell you. And just look at parents, look at what you're spending for travel ball, because I'm sure this 10-year-old plays travel ball. So look at the expenses of what you're paying in travel ball, in lessons that aren't working, and showcases. Um, and then look at the results that you're getting. Right? If for your results that your kid is injured, you may want to look at where your money is being spent and spend it in a place that's going to keep your kid healthy and choosing when he stops pitching, not having it chosen for him.
I agree. Well said.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.